and 1,997 persons in 71 houses with 393 rooms in and near Church Street. That in this and the adjoining district there exists a multitude of foul courts and alleys. Many cellars receive all their light through the door, while in not a few the inhabitants sleep upon the bare floor, though most of them possess bedsteads at least. Nicholson's Court, for example, contains 28 wretched little rooms with 151 human beings in the greatest want, there being but 2 bedsteads and 2 blankets to be found in the whole court. The poverty is so great in Dublin, that a single benevolent institution, the Mendicity Association, gives relief to 2,500 persons or 1% of the population daily, receiving and feeding them for the day, and dismissing them at night. Dr. Allison describes a similar state of things in Edinburgh, whose superb situation, which has won it the title of the modern Athens, and whose brilliant aristocratic quarter in the new town, contrasts strongly with the foul wretchedness of the poor in the old town. Allison asserts that this extensive quarter is as filthy and horrible as the worst district of Dublin, while the Mendicity Association would have as great a proportion of needy persons to assist in Edinburgh as in the Irish capital. He asserts, indeed, that the poor in Scotland, especially in Edinburgh and Glasgow, are worse off than in any other region of the three kingdoms, and that the poorest are not Irish, but Scotch. The preacher of the Old Church of Edinburgh, Dr. Lee, testified in 1836, before the Commission of Religious Instruction, that he had never before seen such misery as in his parish, where the people were without furniture, without everything, 2 married couples often sharing one room. In a single day he had visited 7 houses in which there was not a bed, in some of them not even a heap of straw. Old people of 80 years sleep on the board floor, nearly all slept in their day clothes. In one cellar room he found 2 families from a Scotch country district. Soon after their removal to the city 2 of the children had died, and a third was dying at the time of his visit. Each family had a filthy pile of straw lying in a corner. The cellar sheltered besides the 2 families a donkey, and was, moreover, so dark that it was impossible to distinguish one person from another by day. Dr. Lee declared that it was enough to make a heart of adamant bleed to see such misery in a country like Scotland. In the Edinburgh Medical and Surgical Journal, Dr. Hennon reports a similar state of things. From a parliamentary report, 35 it is evident that in the dwellings of the poor of Edinburgh a want of cleanliness reigns, such as must be expected under these conditions. On the bedposts chickens roost at night, dogs and horses share the dwellings of human beings, and the natural consequence is a shocking stench, with filth and swarms of vermin. The prevailing construction of Edinburgh favours these atrocious conditions as far as possible. The old town is built upon both slopes of a hill, along the crest of which runs the High Street. Out of the High Street there open downwards multitudes of narrow crooked alleys, called wynds from their many turnings, and these wynds form the proletarian district of the city. The houses of the Scotch cities, in general, are 5 or 6-storied buildings, like those of Paris, and in contrast with England where, so far as possible, each family has a separate house. The crowding of human beings upon a limited area is thus intensified. 35b. These streets, says an English journal in an article upon the sanitary condition of the working people in cities, are often so narrow, that a person can step from the window of one house into that of its opposite neighbour, while the houses are piled so high, story upon story, that the light can scarcely penetrate into the court or alley that lies between. In this part of the city there are neither sewers nor other drains, nor even privies belonging to the houses. In consequence, all refuse, garbage, and excrements of at least 50,000 persons are thrown into the gutters every night, so that, in spite of all street sweeping, a mass of dried filth and foul vapours are created, which not only offend the sight and smell, but endanger the health of the inhabitants in the highest degree. Is it to be wondered at, that in such localities all considerations of health, morals, and even the most ordinary decency are utterly neglected? On the contrary, all who are more intimately acquainted with the condition of the inhabitants will testify to the high degree which disease, wretchedness, and demoralization have here reached. Society in such districts has sunk to a level indescribably low and hopeless. The houses of the poor are generally filthy, and are evidently never cleansed. They consist in most cases of a single room which, while subject to the worst ventilation, is yet usually kept cold by the broken and badly fitting windows, and is sometimes damp, and partly below ground level, always badly furnished and thoroughly uncomfortable, a straw heap often serving the whole family for a bed, upon which men and women, young and old, sleep in revolting confusion. Water can be had only from the public pumps, and the difficulty of obtaining it naturally fosters all possible filth. In the other great seaport towns the prospect is no better. Liverpool, with all its commerce, wealth, and grandeur, yet treats its workers with the same barbarity. A full fifth of the population, more than 45,000 human beings, live in narrow, dark, damp, badly ventilated cellar dwellings, of which there are 7,862 in the city. Besides these cellar dwellings there are 2,270 courts, small spaces built up on all four sides, and having but one entrance, a narrow, covered passageway, the whole ordinarily very dirty, and inhabited exclusively by proletarians. Of such courts we shall have more to say, when we come to Manchester. In Bristol, on one occasion, 2,800 families were visited, of whom 46% occupied but one room each. Precisely the same state of things prevails in the factory towns. In Nottingham there are in all 11,000 houses, of which between 7,000 and 8,000 are built back to back with a rear party wall, so that no through ventilation is possible, while a single privy usually serves for several houses. During an investigation, made a short time since, many rows of houses were found to have been built over shallow drains covered only by the boards of the ground floor. In Leicester, Derby, and Sheffield, it is no better. At Birmingham, the article above cited from the Artisan states. In the older quarters of the city there are many bad districts, filthy and neglected, full of stagnant pools and heaps of refuse. Courts are very numerous in Birmingham, reaching 2,000, and containing the greater number of the working people of the city. These courts are usually narrow, muddy, badly ventilated, ill-drained, and lined with 8 to 20 houses, which, by reason of having their rear walls in common, can usually be ventilated from one side only. In the background, within the court, there is usually an ash heap or something of the kind, the filth of which cannot be described. It must, however, be observed that the newer courts are more sensibly built, and more decently kept, and that even in the old ones, the cottages are much less crowded than in Manchester and Liverpool, wherefore Birmingham shows even during the reign of an epidemic a far smaller mortality than, for instance, Wolverhampton, Dudley, and Bilston, only a few miles distant. Cellar dwellings are unknown too, in Birmingham, though a few cellars are misused as workrooms. The lodging houses for proletarians are rather numerous, over 400, chiefly in courts in the heart of the town. They are nearly all disgustingly filthy and ill-smelling, the refuge of beggars, thieves, tramps, and prostitutes, who eat, drink, smoke, and sleep here without the slightest regard to comfort, or decency, in an atmosphere endurable to these degraded beings only. Glasgow is in many respects similar to Edinburgh, possessing the same wines, the same tall houses. Of this city the Artisan observes: the working class forms here some 78% of the whole population, about 300,000, and lives in parts of the city which exceed in wretchedness and squalor the lowest nooks of St Giles and Whitechapel, the liberties of Dublin, the wines of Edinburgh. There are numbers of such localities in the heart of the city, south of the Trongate, westward from the Salt Market, in Calton and off the High Street, endless labyrinths of lanes or wides into which open at almost every step, courts or blind alleys, formed by ill-ventilated, high-piled, waterless, and dilapidated houses. These are literally swarming with inhabitants. They contain 3 or 4 families upon each floor, perhaps 20 persons. In some cases each story is let out in sleeping places, so that 15 to 20 persons are packed, one on top of the other, I cannot say accommodated, in a single room. These districts shelter the poorest, most depraved, and worthless members of the community, and may be regarded as the sources of those frightful epidemics which, beginning here, spread desolation over Glasgow. Let us hear how J.C. Symonds, Government Commissioner for the Investigation of the Condition of the Hand Weavers, describes these portions of the city 38. I have seen wretchedness in some of its worst phases both here, and upon the continent, but until I visited the wines of Glasgow I did not believe that so much crime, misery, and disease could exist in any civilized country. In the lower lodging houses 10, 12, sometimes 20 persons of both sexes, all ages and various degrees of nakedness, sleep indiscriminately huddled together upon the floor. These dwellings are usually so damp, filthy, and ruinous, that no one could wish to keep his horse in one of them. And in another place, the wines of Glasgow contain a fluctuating